Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. Very excited to get into what our topic today, which is, of course, what makes a man. This all started due to the fact of it was International Men's Day yesterday. I didn't even know about it until Shaun brought it up yesterday, or in the future, later today. I'm not sure how this all works in timings wise. But before we get into anything, as I am excited, you should be too. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff to get your emails in the morning whenever we go live, which is, of course, every day. If you have any thoughts, questions, or comments at all throughout the discussion, by all means, put them up in the comment section and we will engage them directly throughout the show. Other than that, Satch, it has been a little while. I want you to give us a quick little intro and then we'll dive into the conversation.
I am Satch, 18-year law enforcement, ultra-endurance athlete, and fundraiser.
Bam. That's brevity. I like it. Under 2 seconds. That was tight. So I have it's a bit of I got some verbiage here, and I want to go through it. It might take me a little while, but I just want you guys to bear with me here because I think it's really poignant to what we're going to be talking about. So it goes like this: You don't become a man because you pass through puberty. You don't become a man because you can make a woman pregnant. You don't become a man because you got a muscle car, because you got muscles, because you got a bachelor's degree, a house, trophies, because people call you a man, you got a mustache, or you started to shave. Then what makes a man? The one word that makes a man: maturity. Maturity is not a qualification to watch R-rated movies. It's not your ability to consume alcohol or smoke. The definition of maturity is something different because maturity is not age, academics, accomplishments, or appearance. Maturity is an attitude that you possess towards the things in life, towards yourself, towards people around you, towards your mistakes, towards your successes. Your maturity is always determined by your attitude. A boy is passive. A man is assertive. A boy lives for a moment. A man plans for future. And there's a whole bunch of things here, but I really wanted to touch on this last piece here that I was talking about is your maturity is always determined by your attitude. And I just really liked that when I was doing some research earlier this morning, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on it. So, what makes a man? Let's talk about it, Satch. What do you think?
Oh man, well, I guess genetically, first off, it makes a man, right? But I think there's a level of responsibility and um, responsibility, authority, obligation, duty. mm, A lot of things are popping into my head. I just don't know how to articulate them all at the same time.
Absolutely. It's a challenging question, right? Like there's so many things that it could be that it's hard to boil it down. But Sean, what are your first thoughts?
Well, first of all, I'm kind of curious as to where you got that verbiage from, because that's quite good. Where did that come from, Chance? I can't hear you.
Because I'm muted. I found it on a site called Quora, which is kind of like a Reddit site where people
Okay, yeah,
put
yeah.
their stuff up, and it was just a piece of verbiage that someone had written, and I thought it was fantastic, so I stole it.
Who wrote it?
Let's see here. The username is Shania with three A's and three H's, so I don't know what to tell you, but it's
Okay, okay.
yeah.
No worries. I was just curious because I've never heard it put across that way, and it's quite interesting, and that's why I think I'm really going to enjoy this conversation, not just today, but throughout the week. Because, if anyone's seen the video that I put out there on a train ride between Ipoh and Kuala Lumpur here in Malaysia, it came directly out of my own head scratching moment where I thought, well, what is International Man's Day all about? What is a man? And like I know some manly men, and I don't think they know either. And I don't think I really know either. Like I've got some ideas, but it surely isn't carved in stone on any tablets anywhere. It's not like it's not written in the stars. It's not carved on a spacecraft. I mean, no one has really defined this as far as I can see. because the podcast today was delayed by about 2.5 hours, I've been scouring the internet ever since, trying to get a sense of what it is to be a man. And I can guarantee you that no one knows, because there's no universal paragraph that defines it. I mean, there's lots of opinions, and they're diverse. And so, how diverse? Well, Chance, you just threw down something that I'd never heard before. I'd never thought of it that way. And there's some relevance to what you said, but it's not the only definition of what it means to be a man. And so I've got a ton of ideas on what it means to be a man. But before I even started thinking about, well, is it this word or that word, or do you have to be this tall or this short? Do you have to knock it out of the park, or do you have to lay back on the couch? Because there's a lot of different opinions out there. What I did do is I thought of it historically. So I considered, what was a man in Sparta? What is a man today? And what is a man 100 years from now? And I think they're three very different things. Certainly between Roman times and now, masculinity, or what it means to be a man, is radically different. But I think today and 100 years from now, I think it's going to be radically different again. So that's where my head has been, considering it through the context of historical consideration. So, I think that's not a bad way to start. What do you think?
I like
I
it.
think
I like
that's
it.
good.
Satch, what do you
I,
got?
yeah, I think based on that, what's the constant in those three? It's this time and society and culture, and all those things shift and evolve over time. So I suspect and even within communities, the idea or the role of a man shifts and changes. So I guess we would have to define for us what it means to be a man, and how do we want to live our lives within the society that we're taking part in.
That's interesting. See, and this is why I think there is so many different definitions out there, because not only is it time sensitive, right? Because like you said, 100 years ago versus 100 years in the future, but it's also regionally differentiated, because what makes a man in the U.S. is different than what makes a man in Kuala Lumpur, which is different than what makes a man in wherever you are, right? So, it based on your region, based on your culture, based on all these other things, that changes. And then you have time on as well. So I think that it's an interesting concept to bring up. But what were your thoughts, Sean, initially on Sparta? What makes a man in Sparta? Because that's interesting. Let's start there, and then we can build forward.
Well, it's a good question, and I think that there's more parallels between Sparta and today than you might imagine, in respect to, okay, I'm going to use Kuala Lumpur as an example right now, or I'll use Malaysia as a whole. My observations have been this to date, and we've only been here now not quite 2 weeks. So what Malaysia is considered is the Asian melting pot. And so the three predominant ethnicities are Chinese, Malay, and Indian. And so our first week was spent in Penang, up in a city called Georgetown. And as we landed there, the day before Diwali kicked off. And I'd booked our hotel specifically in the center of Little India. Little India is about, generally speaking, 4 blocks wide, and it's dense. It's almost like being in India to some degree. But man, you add Diwali, and it's full tilt, bro. I mean, it's all the fireworks, it's all the things. I mean, mega. And so every single night that we were there, that place was popping off. It was full cultural magnificence. And so, and then you moved a block outside of Little India and you were into the the Chinese section or into the Malaysian section. And so, you know, just in that first week, it was an intense melting pot experience where you saw from block to block the difference between what it means to be a man on one block and what it means to be a man on another block. And I'm contextualizing that based on not just a man standing by himself, but also a man standing next to a woman and how that relationship plays out from block to block. So in our current time, from block to block, within ethnicities, I could see the difference between what it means to be a man there and over on that block, what it means to be a man there, as contextualized with the relationship with a woman, or from man to man, or from that man to me. Each block was different. If I caught someone's eye, they were different on one block than they were on a different block. And so having positioned that, now I'm going to go back to your original question, which was Sparta. And I think it would have been the same, man, because you had socioeconomic stratas that were maybe similar to today. And, you know, as a slave, right, all the way up through the chain, all the way up to the most affluent, a man meant something here versus a man that meant something there. And so we can contextualize it against history, and there's a vast gap between what it means to be a man, but also within each time period, there's a vast gap between what it meant to be a man, depending on who you were as a man at that time.
That is interesting, Satch. You got any thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, he's absolutely right. I mean, depending on the culture where you're at, like I know in India, it's normal for men to hold hands walking down the street. It's not a thing. So I guess I don't know. I guess the conversation, sh or are we trying to figure out what does a man mean to us and how we want to live our lives as a man? Is that the question, or we're just trying to identify different cultures how they function as a man?
I think at least the way I was looking at this was, what are the common pillars between the regions, between the cultures, between the things? Because, as you guys said, there's different socioeconomic stratas and such that will differentiate what makes a man in those socioeconomic structures. But what I really want to know is, when you boil all that down, what are the core tenets? What are the pieces that are shared across culture, across time, across all things that makes a man? That's what I was going after, at least in my mind. So, does that help at all?
It's still kind of, I mean, for me, it's a bit challenging to identify because, I mean, if you were to boil everything down, then it comes down to a biological level. Because cultures are so different on every, like, I mean, and I don't know every culture, and I don't know how every culture functions. I only know the cultures that I'm part of and the people that I surround myself with. And so to have a common sort of denominator in terms of what a man is, I know the common denominator with my friends and the people that I surround myself with and the type of people they are and the type of men that they are. So for me, it's easier to speak on that than, a culture that's maybe not familiar to me and, speaking on something that actually I don't know much about.
Yeah, no, I get that absolutely. So here's a thought, at least, and we can make this as an experiment. And just before we get into that, I'm just gonna hit this up real quick because Winter Storm. Super belated good morning, all. Good to see you, Winter Storm. Just want to hit that in before we go any
Yeah,
further.
I'll see you in an hour, Corey.
There you go. So I also want to ask anybody watching, what do you consider making what makes a man? I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts for those watching. But I'm going to give you a list here, and I want to see if this, holds true in any culture that we know of. So the list here is: a man is assertive, a man plans for the future, a man looks for a wife, a man acts, a man is protective, shoulders responsibility, quietly lives his own life, makes progress, a man serves, and a man tells the truth. And I think those are pretty consistent across most of the cultures that I know of. And I mean, I'm not a an expert in any way, but what do you guys think, Sean? What do you do those think? I mean, you've seen a lot, right? So what do you think? What do you think about that
Yeah.
list?
So the reason that I raised the historical piece and then raised the socioeconomic or ethnicity piece, folding all of that together, it's a really complex bowl of soup. And I think that's what makes it difficult to truly define what it means to be a man. I mean, if I'm just talking with my buddies, like a guy across the table, and we're kicking it back and having a few laughs, chances are we can get to our own definition of what it means to be a man a lot quicker than if we put 1,000 men into a room from a variety of different world experiences. It'd be more challenging to come up with a clear definition of what it means to be a man. And so I wanted to set that stage, first of all, to say that I think that there are commonalities. And if you go back to Sparta time, as a slave, within a room full, let's say 100 slaves, there would have been that one outlier that would have been perhaps the perfect definition of what it meant to be a man at that time. Whereas the other 99 might have been beaten down so hard that their only idea of what it meant to be a man was just to freaking survive for one more meal. And so different times, different socioeconomics, different ethnicities, what it means to be a man can mean different things. But the commonality is maybe amongst the outliers or maybe amongst the more common in the modern times, there are general themes for what it means to be a man. And some of the things that you said on that list, I believe, fit into that category. So what I did do was I thought about, these are terms that aren't overly familiar to me, because listen, I'm not someone who delves too deeply into, I suppose it would be social politics or into matters of all things to do with society. I'm just a common man who observes the world curiously. I have some ideas, I have some thoughts, but it doesn't mean that I got it all figured out. So what I did was I was considering some of the modern terms that are out there right now, and I think there's 3 of them. And I don't fully understand them well, but I scribbled some things down underneath each category. So you've got, and I think to be a man, there's a term out there which is masculinity. And so you have the toxic masculinity, you have the traditional masculinity, and then you have the healthy masculinity. Now, when I was coming up, nothing was called healthy masculinity. It's like a weird word to me in a way. It's almost too modern. But it's a good word and it's a good idea that we have healthy masculinity. But like 20 years ago, if you'd have said, hey boys, let's all just get together and work on our healthy masculinity, you know what would have happened? Someone would have Chuck Norrised you upside the head. That's the way it would have been. And so it wasn't accepted 20 years ago, but today it is accepted, and rightfully so, because I think as men, we all have to do better. And so as I thought about toxic and traditional and healthy, I had to scribble a few things down. Now, I don't often do this. You know, I'm not a guy who takes notes or thinks about notes, but I got a little cheat sheet because I had a freaking 2.5-hour delay on the show, so I thought I'd scribble some things down. So I broke it down really quick. And this is my list. And this list doesn't, it isn't categorically correct. I'm not making any claims to listen to what I'm about to say because it's fact. These are just my sort of cursory observations. So again, I broke it down into toxic masculinity, traditional masculinity, and healthy masculinity. Under toxic masculinity, which I think, man, I've probably been victim to. I've probably been that guy at one point in my life. So toxic masculinity, it's where you have some form of discrimination. Now, I'm not saying that it's racial discrimination. I'm just saying some sort of discrimination where you're discriminating against someone because they don't fit into your idealized version of what it means to be a man. Under toxic masculinity, there's also domination. Well, certainly, I was a dude who liked to dominate my battle space. Now I dominate the battle space rather than dominate another man. And so there's some nuance there. Toxic masculinity, aversion to emotions. And so at one point, I was a freaking cyborg, man. Like, I was not down with the emotions. I was all about smashing and not really being emotional. I was almost robotic in nature at one point in my life. So I think that's pretty toxic, man. And physical aggression. Man, if you looked at me wrong, it was game on. I was ready to throw down if you even side-eyed me in the wrong way. That's just the way I was. And possibly to some degree I still am. I still have a hint of it in me, but I'm going to touch on that in a sec. Traditional masculinity. What I scribbled down was this. You're tough, you're a protector, and you're a provider. I mean, I sat down in EPO for breakfast with a young fella called Zion, a little 8-year-old fella, been doing 4 years of martial arts. And I asked him what it meant to be a martial artist, and he said, you know, protect himself, protect his family. And his theme was he wanted to be a protector. And I get that. I mean, that's righteous, but it shouldn't be your focus. It shouldn't be that shouldn't be the central pillar of your life. It's okay to protect, but I don't think you should be walking around like the Punisher, like you're the protector of society, which is kind of like, I see some guys out there that are trying to run their life like they're the protector of, you know, they're defending the honor of the internet, they're defending the honor of their everything. And so there is some traditional masculinity that could probably be improved upon. And then the final one I scribbled down for healthy masculinity or being a healthy man is you're honest, you're kind, you're respectful, and you're open or openness. And so there's a wild difference between toxic masculinity all the way through to healthy masculinity. And I don't think that every single man has to, you know, panic right now if they don't fit into the perfect. You're healthy, bro. That you're a healthy masculinity. You're a healthy man because you just checked off all of the 4 things that Shaun said. And if you stray from that, you're a freaking jerk. I'm not saying that. We've all got room for improvement. So those were my thoughts I was scribbling down on paper just a couple of hours ago. And again, they're just topics for discussion, as it were.
Absolutely. There's a lot in there that I really want to touch on, so we can check all these boxes and be healthy. But Satch, what are your first thoughts on all those?
Yeah, I think the characteristics that you had mentioned earlier, Sean, Chance, I don't think those are exclusive to men because those, I mean, women can have those as well, right? But I think how Sean um, written out his thoughts, toxic, masculinity, and healthy and whatnot, I think those seem to make some sense to me. And I mean, I've been toxic most of my life, I think. But I think, you know, having a different understanding of what a man should be, um, in terms of a healthy man, honest, you know, protector, all these types of things. I think nowadays that's what people are trying to talk about in terms of what masculinity is and how you want to act as a man moving forward.
There's a great quote from I think it's Marcus Aurelius who was saying, "Waste no more time arguing over what a good man is. Be one." And I think I love the thought pattern on that one, but I think that if you don't spend any time thinking about it, if you don't spend any time discussing it, like we're doing, then you're going to get all the variation in the world of what we have today, right? We don't. I think by not discussing it, we're kind of losing our concept. And Shaun, I did want to get into one. I'm going to start with one of your points. Was it kind of centers around control? And I don't mean controlling other people, but controlling oneself, right? You're saying emotional or like not having control of your emotions or being aggressive to the point of trying to protect other people against a idealized version, being the Punisher, that kind of stuff. And it brought to mind a lot of when I first started reading about Stoicism in terms of, and I really believe that it meant to have no emotions, to just be to be stoic meant to have no emotions. And later on in life, I understood better that it just means that you have emotional control. You're not letting your emotions run your life. You're just controlling them. And I'm wondering if, do you think that a lot of that, the toxic masculinity and a lot of the, even the traditional masculinity lacked a level of control, whereas the healthy masculine man of nowadays, let's say, has that control, not so much mastered, but like developed at least. What do you think? Shaun, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think?
Well, I agree. And so I think that it comes down to this. And I did make a further list. This is my last list that I scribbled down. I'm not the list master 9000. I rarely do this, but this is a pretty freaking hard-hitting subject. So I just wanted to get some clear thoughts on it in case the entire interweb went crazy if we didn't do this right as an entry point into the topic. So here's what I wrote down, my thoughts on what it takes to be a healthy man. Now, it's not a perfect list. I didn't have 9 years to think about this. I had 2.5 hours. And like I said in my video, I will freaking challenge any man out there. You've got 180 seconds right now. Grab a pen and paper and write down what it means to be a man right now. And I'll bet you'll fail. You'll fail your own freaking test because there's very few men who've thought about the perfect list for them. They'll think about some key words like, I'll protect my family's honor with my 12 gauge. That ain't being a man. That's kind of being dumb in my books. That's just a flaring moment. That doesn't mean that that's how you run your life. If you're standing by your front door with a 12 gauge shotgun your entire life and thinking that that's what it means to be a man, you're terribly wrong. And I hope you pick up what I'm going to put down when I read this list. So a healthy man, a modern healthy man. You should be strong, kind, available as a dad and as a husband. You should manage and process your negative emotions. You should have self-confidence. You should have self-belief. You should be vulnerable. You should be transparent. You should be able to open up to the world around you. You should be able to do things that you will consider as non-masculine. And you should look within yourself for authentic expression. Now, that isn't a complete list, but it's enough of a start for me that it got me thinking about what it means to be a man, what I want to be as a man. Maybe not what I am right now, but something to strive for as future Shaun, to be a better man. And I think maybe that's where we kind of get it wrong as society nowadays. We have an idealized version of what it means to be a man that's force-fed into our brains by media, and we think that in order to be it, we're the Punisher with the 12 gauge by the front door waiting to fight off the zombies to defend our family. And it's wrong. It's wrong. Because at no point on this list did I write that down. In fact, I wrote quite the contrary, to be vulnerable and etc. These are things that are tough for men who have been categorizing themselves as strong men, when it's quite the opposite. They're kind of weak men if they're relying on the crutch of a 12 gauge shotgun. Does that make sense? Now, I'm not getting it for all things good in the world. Do not get this twisted. I like guns. I'm not opposed to guns. It's not that I hate 12 gauge shotguns. It's not that I hate that you've got a 12 gauge shotgun. But it is a crutch if that's all you're relying on to define it as your manhood.
Yeah, could not agree more. Satch, thoughts?
Yeah, I think conversations like these, and if anyone's watching them, got to really think about them very deeply as to what it means to yourself when you're watching this or listening to this. So for me, over the last few years, I've been striving to be you know, a healthy man. I've been trying to do that because I know for myself, years past, I was toxic and I exhibited behaviors that were on the toxic side as it related to men, like that guy with the 12 shot gauge shotgun. Here to protect, but really not really understanding what that actually meant. And so for me, it's been an effort. So the things that you just mentioned, Shaun, as a healthy man, those are the things identify with as what would be a healthy man. And it is hard and it is a challenge. And it's almost a constant effort every single day to think about those things, to be those types of things, to be that person every single day. It's effort. It's not something that you go, well, at least for me, it's not something that I go through life not thinking about because I have to constantly think about those things if I want to be able to achieve the type of man I want to be.
Yeah, you're at least on the money in my view. And to your point, Shaun, the dude standing there with the shotgun trying to be the protector, it's a catastrophized view of the world, right? You're talking about the worst case scenario that you just need to be absolutely ready for, right? And you can stand sentry in front of your door with a shotgun all you want. But the likelihood of these things happening are low. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be ready. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be prepared or have the skill set or the stress inoculation to manage those situations. But it shouldn't be your life. It shouldn't be your identity. It's similar with the military. A lot of times guys get out of the military and that is their identity. Right? They're wearing CAD pad till the day they die, and that's just the way it's going to be. Up until you realize that that's not sustainable, right? You can't live that life every day unless you're in the military. And so I think that has a lot to do with it. And there's I wonder if I guess the question I want to ask you guys is, do you think it's a bit of a hero complex? Do you think that, as young men, we're raised to see Rambo and, G.I. Joe and John Wick and like there's the lone man taking on the world. I'm going to be the hero of the story when the everyday when you live a life, there's an everyday. John Wick still has to wake up and make breakfast, right? He still has to take his kids to school or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there is, at least in my mind, I'm wondering what you guys think on that. If we have a bit of a hero complex in general, Satch, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so, man. I mean, you never see John Wick training at all. Like, I mean, all the all the shooting and the ninja stuff, man. You don't see him go to class or train or anything. Anyway, but yeah, I think so, man. I mean, I grew up watching superheroes and Incredible Hulk and all these different things, and I wanted to be those things, not really understanding how to properly be those things. And I think it takes time and deep thought to figure out what that actually means, those types of people that we're looking at, and what actually a masculine man is, and then figuring out how to interpret that information and apply it into your own life. It takes time and effort, and I think watching these things and Rambo, man, I was all over that. I'd argue the first Rambo was probably the best one, but but and which was actually more realistic to the person that he was. Anyways, I digress. But I think, yeah, man, I agree with you. I think that hero culture is all over the place, man. Especially in the '80s, if you were an '80s kid watching a lot of the movies coming out, it was all that, man. It was like Van Damme, Schwarzenegger, Running Man, all the things. And of course, I identified it like crazy with those people, but not truly understanding what that would mean to come out of the 18, 19, 20 years old, like a running man from Arnold Schwarzenegger movie trying to kill everybody, and it doesn't work.
The Running Man is a great movie. I love that. Such a great one. Shaun, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're right. The hero complex is a thing. And when I was growing up, in fact, we were just saying it the other day in the podcast, it was with Tip Cullen, I believe, that we were talking about being an action man and how I'd been raised in England to, want to be an action man. And I turned into a freaking action man. Like, I wanted to be it, so I made it freaking happen. But then once I was it, then what? Like, it's it's not like you've solved the mystery to the universe and the yay, green check mark, I won. Like, I've still got a few more years ahead of me, so what am I gonna do with it? I gotta get better. I gotta get more three-dimensional. And so I started looking around the world with some curiosity and realized that being an action man is only one part of me as a one-dimensional being that I need to add more parts to become a three-dimensional being. And so I travel the world, I talk to people, I learn things and realize that just being a hero isn't enough. So, you raised John Wick as the example, which is a great example of the point I'm going to try to make. So, a lot of young men, particularly, and myself included, I love on the Wick and Hammer, man. I love the Wick. So, at the start of the very first movie, I mean, he's having to go through the tragedy of his wife dying in front of him. He's sad as hell, man. Like, that guy's going through the struggle bus on that moment, through the whole thing. I mean, then his dog gets smoked. I mean, that's a tough gig. And so, like, the Wickenhammers got, he's got a little bit of the tears going on there. We don't see him getting all dehydrated from it, but, like he's going through some tough times. But no one sees that part by the second movie. He's just a one-man wrecking machine with all the ninja moves. And I love that stuff, man, don't get me wrong. But let's not lose sight of how it all kicked off. It kicked off with a guy who loved his wife, was sensitive to the loss, was trying to process his emotions. And so, like, there's parts on my list here that I scribbled down that would have related to the Wickenhammer. And as men, sometimes we look at that stuff as a cursory, fleeting moment, and then we're straight into the meat and potatoes of the flying through the air with all the guns ablazing, because it's a hero complex moment that we like to assign to ourselves. We love the action. We love I think as men, maybe as women as well, I don't know, I'm not one, so I can't speak for the ladies, but as men, I think there's a little part of us that is perhaps comfortable with violence, or at least some of us, where not only are we comfortable with it, that we are intrigued by it to some degree, perhaps. And so I think the movie is a great example of how, as men, we can lose sight of the other part of the wick that is still within us,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I
Satch, you got
think,
something?
yeah, man. I was just thinking about that. I know we're talking about movies for a second here, but I don't know. I think for me, let's say if we're watching a John Wick, I actually appreciated the first movie better than the other ones because it did show those parts. And we were talking about Rambo, First Blood. I liked that movie much more than the other ones because it did show those parts, the vulnerability, the trauma, all the things associated to whatever it was he was dealing with. So for me, watching those movies back then, and I think a lot of people would probably agree with me that they probably preferred those movies because they showed more depth and more emotionality, vulnerability from those characters. And they are actually what you would argue as, the masculine type of man. They know how to do all the things. So I think for me, I gravitated to those types of characters for a certain. Well, I think I did gravitate to those types of characters more so rather than your straight up just full on action. I just didn't quite understand how to reconcile both of those until later in life.
Absolutely. There's some comments here I want to touch on, but I have a thought on this that I really want to dive into because I really want your guys' opinion on it. But I'm going to hit these first. So, Winterstorm jumped in. He was talking about earlier. He said, "Could that definition of a man also apply to a woman?" When I was giving that list, and I think, as you said, Satch, earlier, 100%. A lot of those things would apply both sides. He says, "Is the definition of a man created by the society and time they live in?" Which is I think we touched on that a bit ago, but yeah, absolutely. And he says, "Is the true definition of a man, of being a man, someone who doesn't feel confined/defined by others' words, allowing themselves to change when needed, but also be determined when needed, without ego?" Another great thought. And actually, let's sit on this one for a little bit because I think it's a great point. Satch, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I think it comes that one point there comes. I think comes to self confidence, right? Being confident in who you are, understanding what kind of person you are, and not really worried about what others may think. So that's how you're able to move forward with making your own decisions without being interrupted by external factors. So I think that comes with self-worth, self-confidence, self-awareness,
I like it.
all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Shaun, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think so. The every year that goes by, I try to get a little bit better at this game called life. And believe it or not, just on this trip alone, I feel like I've evolved a little bit more. And it's probably because I've been around more of a Buddhist culture to some degree, the Buddhist way of living, the Buddhist way of thinking. I'm not a religious guy, but I have my own form of spirituality. So it's not that I'm about to, shift into some sort of a religious sect or cult or anything like that. I'm not going down that trajectory, but I am willing to be curious and absorb things that speak to me internally, that make sense to me, that make me feel like it'll make me a better human being. And so I've actually got the books right here. I was reading them I was looking for inspiration. This isn't a plug for books. I'm not plugging these books. But as I was trying to think about what it means to be a man, I was looking for all sorts of different vectors that I could consider what it means to be a man. So I was looking for wisdom that I didn't feel I had within me, or I wanted to build on the wisdom that's already within me on this subject. And so there's some Buddhist writings that are out there, or different writings over here, or wherever, that I was bumping into them that were just adding minor layers to my game on this subject. So I'm probably better from this vacation than I was before I went on this vacation on this subject. And it's just because I've tried to keep an open mind and look for more wisdom. And I think that's what we all need to do. And I think that's where it kind of goes wrong, is people will have some self-confidence. They'll lock their ego into a fixed position, believe that they've got it all figured out, and then start flaring out when it should be quite the opposite. You should try to destroy your ego, try to realize that you've got nothing figured out. You should be a black hole imploding on yourself rather than flaring out, and just try to freaking be you, but try to be smarter by every day absorbing wisdom from the universe that's all around us all the time. That's really kind of been cemented to me on this vacation. I thought I had it kind of dialed in before I jumped on a plane and came over here, but none of us have got much figured out. So you just got to do your best to absorb knowledge and be open-minded, and realize that, as Winterstorm says, that you got to do it without ego. And it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing for me to do anyway, because I like to think that I know a few things. I like to think that I've learned a few things. And I like to think that I've got a handle on my ego much better than I did 10 years ago. But that is not the case. It is a constant, not daily battle, but it's a constant work in progress for me, for sure.
Yeah.
I have a question on that actually.
Hit it.
Do you find, Shaun, like, do you battle your ego more when you're speaking to people that are maybe not as experienced as you, but if you don't battle it as much when you're around people that are at the same level as you?
That's a good question. I've never really thought of it that way. I think maybe the example that I'll use, we were in a restaurant this evening. It was a North Indian restaurant here in Kuala Lumpur. Looked it up on the interwebs, dirt cheap, really good ratings. And in the reviews on Google, it spoke about how kind and warm and generous the staff is. And I thought, bam, that's my kind of place. So we sauntered on down the way there, about a 10-minute walk, went in, and it was, as the review stated, it was exactly that. And if you look in my Instagram stories later on today, you'll see me, I've got my arm around a couple of the staffers. One's a lady on, and then there's another guy in the background, and that all came about because I ordered a coconut, a fresh coconut, with the top chopped off and straw. And it's my first coconut since I've been over here. It cost me $1.75. It's delicious, man. But as that kind of got delivered, I took my first sip and I kind of did one of these, whoa, that's good. And there's like 6 staffers all lined up there kind of out of camera. And they're like, yeah. And they're all digging on it, man. They're all into it. And so from that point on, I was part of the family. I was part of the restaurant. So every move I made, they were checking out the move I made. Every move they made, I was checking out the moves they were making. So it was a lot of this and a lot of nodding and a lot of jiving and a lot of synchronicity. And at the end, like the old girl, as I was posing for the coconut drink for my wife to take the photo, she was kind of like giving me one of those kind of cool, but you're kind of posing a little bit. She was kind of giving me one of those looks, and I thought it was great, man. I thought we were having a fun little moment. But at the end of the night, after paid the bill, I said, "Hey, can I get a photo?" And she said, "Yeah." And so I got my arm around her, and she gets right in, like big tight squeeze, and puts her head on my shoulder, and she was totally into it. And so the reason I'm saying that is because she doesn't know me. I don't know her. And there was zero ego in that moment. I didn't have to say a freaking word. There was no challenge. There was no nothing. It was just 2 human beings existing kind of in a space of, and I'm going to say it, kind of loving each other just briefly for a moment. I'll never see her again unless I eat in that same restaurant tomorrow. But I'll never see her again. And I think that little magical moment will be missed by the entirety of the internet when they look at that little photo in my stories, unless they listen to what I'm saying right now. And so what I'm genuinely trying to do, Satch, is this. I'm just trying to be cool, man. I'm just trying to be cool with people, and I'm just trying to get right with the world around me and love back on it, and it reciprocates itself. And so, if someone wants to kind of categorize, or someone wants to say, well, you're here and they're there, or you're there and she's there, I don't think it's a great way to do it, you know what I mean? And so nowadays I'm just trying to do me, but do me in a way that kind of loves on the world around me. I hope that makes sense.
It does. The only reason I asked that, because I was thinking about, if I'm around people that I believe that have a wealth of knowledge and experience, my ego is like not there, not present. I'm just like taking in information. I'm just listening. I'm just like, But if I feel I might have more experience than someone else, then my ego starts jumping in, and it starts telling, I start functioning maybe a little bit different. So I have to be more cognizant of it, and I have to control it a lot more, rather than in scenarios where I feel like I'm receiving rather than. I don't even know about receiving, but like when I feel like I'm around people that I feel have a wealth of knowledge or experience, or etc.
Yeah, listen, I do the same thing. The little story that I just relayed is just what I'm striving for.
Got it.
That doesn't mean I'm doing it. It doesn't mean that I'm successful like 24/7, because then that would be called some sort of bodhisattva, or some sort of, like sainthood, or some sort of, I've evolved to some sort of enlightened species, which I have not.
No, you
In fact,
haven't.
quite the opposite, And so that's the direction I'm trying to head. I've identified that is the path forward to not greatness to be recognized by the world. I've just identified it as greatness for me, for Shaun, to be great in his own world, in the larger world that's wrapped around me. I know what I got to do, but it ain't easy to do, because I'm also human, not a saint. And so, like I as you stated, I do as you do, for sure. I'm just trying to do it less.
So
You know what I
how
mean?
did you? So in that experience, how did that experience feel? Like being there, that sort of loving on each other. Was that like at a scale of 1 to 10? How did that feel?
It's an 11, man. It's
Yeah.
11. It's, these kind of fleeting moments that are unplanned. Like, I'll take that with me for the rest of my life. I can't recreate that anywhere else except with the next person, authentically, magically, unplanned, like a flash from the universe, you know, just if you're willing to let it happen, it'll always present itself and it'll always happen. But you got to let it happen. You got to be open to the moment. You got to be strong, you got to be kind, you got to be available, you got to manage, you got to be self-confident, self-belief, vulnerable, transparent, you got to open up, you got to be able to consider being non-masculine. You got to look within for your authentic expression of who you are. Because if you can do those things and you're leaning next to someone and they're putting their head on your shoulder and they're seeking those things, well, now you've got like it's Newt, as I called it the other day in my live IG chat, you've got the neutronic force of awesomeness, whatever
Well, I
that
mean,
means.
I think it's very, I think it's awesome that you're able to tell that story and then explain the benefits, the surrounding it. So when people watch it or see it on your Instagram, they'll understand more deeply what is actually happening there. And then that you scored it 11 out of 10 in terms of a feeling, how it felt. So if someone's feeling that sort of feeling, I mean, to recreate that or try to recreate that uh, as much as you possibly can becomes more of a habit, I think, because if there's that positive reinforcement of actually doing the thing.
I mean, who doesn't want it? I mean, who doesn't want it? Who doesn't want to feel that feel? Who doesn't want to feel the 11 out of 10? Like, there's lots of other 11 out of 10s, don't get me wrong. Like, there's 11 out of 10s when I freaking crack it out of the park in some sort of task. There's 11 out of 10s when I go mega on something. But there's also an 11 out of 10 where I'm just like coexisting with another human being on an energetic level that is lighting up the universe, you know? So there's
Agreed.
many level out of 10s. And I think that probably that's the key to what we're talking about right now in regards to what it means to be a man. It is multifaceted. It is
Because,
not just it is not just like big knuckles, you know?
well, in that moment, I would argue that was the quintessential moment of being man because you made someone else feel 11 out of 10 as well, not
I
just
think so.
yourself. Yeah, that's
Yeah, I
cool,
think
man.
so.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So I have a thought on this, and I have so many notes written down from the that we're going to get into later this week because I think it'll apply for sure. But to your point, to both your guys' point, and I'm going to try to boil it back down into one pithy statement, as Shaun likes to say, in that what makes a man is the how far they're willing to go for internal greatness versus external greatness. And so, I'm going to explain this here in a second and get your guys' thoughts on it. Is that all of the things that you listed off there, Shaun, in your list of what makes a man, has to do with seeking greatness within yourself, right? Seeking those great moments, those great times, those great feelings, to be to be truly yourself. And I think the things that we struggle with, where we see external greatness, we see somebody else doing that and go, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to a restaurant, I'm going to grab the staff, and I'm going to take a picture with them, right? That's the external greatness. You're trying to recreate something that wasn't yours. And so I'm just postulating this. I want to get your guys' thoughts on it. Is do you think that search for internal greatness is what actually makes a man versus trying to replicate external greatness from the outside world?
I don't
Sean?
even.
Oh,
No,
Zach, if
sorry.
you got something, go for it.
Yeah, I don't know what internal greatness means. Um, I think what I would want to strive for is just a peace, right? Where you're feeling nice and calm and peaceful. Right? Like, so I don't know what an internal um, greatness means, but so that's what I was just wanted to make a point on, or at least a comment on.
Absolutely. Sean, do you got any thoughts on it? Or
I
do you want me
do.
to? Yeah.
No, I do. I think what you stated there, Chance, is you distilled down quite well the struggle of this entire conversation of what it means to be a man. Now, I don't want to get all weird hippy dippy. I don't want to get all philosophical either. I don't want to freak anyone out, but I think the thing that I'm seeking now and have been seeking for a while is I'm trying to find the greatness of the universe within me, and that will simply illustrate itself in the external universe around me. My world will suck externally if I suck internally. And I think that's where it goes wrong for a lot of people. If you're not squaring up your internal universe, then your external universe is a mess. And I think that what we're, if we're all just little energetic beings, and the universe is us and we're the universe, well, if we're doing it wrong, our universe is wrong. And so it's all about what's inside of us. And if you're not working on your internal, then your external is messed up. And if you can't see that, it'll appear shortly.
Mm.
So for me, I think it's really about, and I didn't know any of this when I was 30. And these are all relatively new thoughts to me, just based on more and more and more reading and more and more and more listening and more and more and more thinking. What is going on in your inner world is what is going on in your outer world. When I walk down a street now, and it's really been reinforced over here in Malaysia, just because the country as a whole is very embracing, very warm, very genuine, very caring, very easy to smile. And so when I'm walking down a road kind of radiating off joy, for lack of a better term, people pick up on it, man. They're more sensitive to it over here. They are not as quick to look for the angle. They are not as quick to run a program against you. They're not looking for the ambush. They're not looking for the insult. They're not looking for the sneer or the snide remark. People are just like, they're genuinely nice people. And being in a nice environment helps recalibrate you to being a nice human being. And once you can be around nice human beings and feel what it means to have almost universal niceness, then you get a better sense of what the world, your world, is supposed to be. And I think that's kind of hard to see in North America to some degree, because around every corner, you're not sure what you're going to get. You're not sure who's going to flip you the bird. You're not sure who's going to honk the horn at you. You're not sure who's going to throw a apple core at you through their window just because they don't like your look. I mean, it's a different place. North America is a different place than over here. And so if you're in North America and you're thinking, yeah, but Shaun, I can't jump on a plane and go to Malaysia for a month and figure all this stuff out. Well, maybe not. But you know what you can do? You can go find some cool people. Hang out with some cool people who think like this, and find a way to allow your inner universe to interact with other inner universes around you, so that you can figure out how the external world is supposed to feel around you.
That is a great point. Satch, got anything else on this?
No, I agree 100%. Your internal world will dictate your external perception.
Absolutely. Now, we are almost out of time here. I have a couple more comments I want to touch on before we carry on. But yeah, when I was thinking about this, the internal versus the external greatness, it was really, all of the things that we want to do, that we want to become, are within us already. We just have to focus on them and make them come to fruition. So I really love that thought process. So I got a comment here. John Minari jumps in here. He says, shotguns are only good for taking out hinges. I hate shotguns. A healthy man doesn't need to pound their chest. And this is a great comment. Like, you don't have to, yet it seems like you do sometimes when you're young, when you're immature, you want to be recognized, but you don't have to. And it's a great point. Winterstorm jumps in here. He says, "Do we identify with characters like Rambo and John Wick because they have internal struggles that they can't properly articulate and never truly solve? It resonates with us on a personal level." I think this is great. And I had actually written down here earlier when we were talking about Rambo was maybe we proxy our issues through violence, right? We don't want to deal with our issues, so we go straight to violence, and that's why I think those movies work really well. But that's a conversation for further down this week. Then we got Freaky Joshi. "There's nothing wrong with embracing philosophy. To be a man is to stand by your educated beliefs." Another great point, and he completely agrees with what we were talking about. So that is fantastic. Now we are just over an hour, so let's get some final thoughts, and we can close off this discussion and enter into a new discussion tomorrow. Satch, final thoughts.
Yeah, so clearly we've defined what a man is. You guys don't need to have this conversation for the rest of the week. We're good to go.
100%.
Yeah. No, I mean, listen, man, it's cool to have these conversations and talk about, for us at least, what it means to be a man, and diving deep on these things, and always talking to you guys. I have a blast. So thanks again.
Absolutely. So, Shaun, any final thoughts?
Well, it's funny that John raised the point of, beating the chest kind of thing, because one of the ways that I was going to try to explain my initial thoughts on this before I jotted some thoughts down was as considering the animal kingdom and the gorilla versus the chimpanzee versus and how the various monkey species kind of deal with these issues of what it means to be a man within their animal kingdom. And I mean, we're only one hop, skip, and a jump away from the chimpanzee or the gorilla. And so, I can see it in society. Some people want to be the gorilla, some want to be the chimpanzee, some just want to swing through a tree and be happy, man. And so, there's a lot of similarities to beating your chest and the reasons for that. And a guy like John doesn't need to beat his chest. A guy like John doesn't need a 12 gauge. He's a cool dude, and I look at him as an imposing dude, and so I believe he's self-confident. And who would run up against that guy? Well, nobody, unless they were dumb. And so, I think it comes down to with John's comment that as a confident guy, he doesn't have to sweat those kind of things. And then to the comment about John Wick and the internal struggles, and maybe the proxy being going straight to violence. Again, maybe, I don't know if it's just a man thing. Maybe it's the entire species, man and woman thing. But I see it more often in men. And here's maybe why, I don't know. I don't have a degree in any of this, but I think we've normalized it. I think that as men, we have accepted the fact that that's what we do. That's who we are. When times get tough, we punch a hole through the wall. So, maybe there's a little bit of that, but we could maybe talk about that at another time. And then to the final point about the philosophical piece, bro, I love on the philosophy. It's just that I didn't have time to get all philosophizing on things. So keep on philosophizing, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the challenge with a show that's only an hour. The fact that philosophy will take us into a realm to 2, 3, 4 hours long. The only thing I really have to add here is that we should each, as men, be striving to learn from those around us constantly, every day, all the time, and we should be seeking to build upon the wisdom that is passed on every single day, so that we can grow into who we are supposed to be. And you can do that every day here on The Collective with us. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chimo.